Hello, we're back. It's Security Weekly News, episode 177. Happy New Year, since this is the first show of the new year, and it is the week of 9 January 2022. So, yeah, toilet snakes, CES, CISA, supply chain library hijinks, QNAP, colors and fakers, and more on the first episode of 2022 for the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Happy New Year, and thanks to all of you for watching the show last year and all those years before last year. It's great to be back, even if I had to go out today in the cold, because I hadn't had to do that. But it's supposed to be like -9 centigrade today or something. But hey, it's still a Happy New Year and a Happy New Show year, and we're all back in action. Well, we wrapped up the wonderful 2021, a year of huddling and waiting for the end. Well, I guess not really. There was a lot of huddling and waiting for the end, sort of, really, I guess. But we just did more drinking at home, or morning drinking, day drinking, afternoon drinking, that kind of stuff. But this first report of the New Year's showed that there was a 50% increase in attacks over 2020, from 2020 to 2021. And this was particularly accentuated, they said, by the year-ending hellstorm that was called Log4Shell, which we've all heard of by now, surely. We'll mention it again later. But of course, that was a massive number of attacks in the last week of 2021. But the report indicated that a record-breaking week in December had 925 cyber attacks per week per organization. Now, I don't know how they measure this, but I mean, that's a lot of attacks, and it was like the record. But even before Log4Shell took off, it was shaping up to be a record-breaking year in 2021. There had already been a 40% increase over 2020 in by October, and the report there showed that one of every 61 organizations worldwide had been hit by ransomware every week. So that's a lot. The highest increase in attacks in 2021 focused on education and research sectors, which had a 75% growth over 2020 in attacks. Government and military grew by 47%, and Africa had the highest level of attacks overall in 2021. I mean, look, I said it in 1986, and I'm going to say it again in 2021, and now I'm saying it in 2022. Security through obscurity does not work. It doesn't even really help. Someone, and it may be the People's Army, or it may be some guy named Gwen who lives in apartment 4F at 2358 West 110th Street. Strangely specific, but you know what you did, Gwen. But someone is going to find that exploit, and they're going to use it. Mark my words. You haven't yet, but you can continue to mark them down through the ages. QNAP is a maker of NASs. I don't know, what's the plural of NAS? NASI? Which is a network attack storage devices. So NASDAs, yeah, but everybody calls them NAS. But anyway, I mean, these are awfully handy ways to upload, all your stuff at home or in your small enterprise. They're particularly, I mean, you can get big ones, you can get small ones, and so forth. At home, I use one as a backup source. At school, we use one to support all of our VMs and so forth. But NAS can be anything from, a terabyte to, petabytes of stuff, but they're all over the place. Anyway, QNAP is a major manufacturer of these sort of SOHO-oriented devices, and they warned that if you have exposed your NAS to the internet, as so many of us have done at some point in time, it's probably a bad idea. In fact, I know it's a bad idea. I mean, these things really need to be kept private and between consenting adults. I mean, wait. I mean, NAS, between consenting NAS and adults. Wait. No, that's a court order. I'm sorry, I can't say that. But there's no good reason your NAS should be ever exposed on the internet. QNAP says there's active ransomware campaigns that are exploiting their NAS devices specifically, and they basically advocated that you disable port forwarding on your router and UPnP on your QNAP device. They have the article has all the details, so if you are using a QNAP NAS device, you may want to read it. They didn't really say a lot else about what's causing this. Or what the risk is, but they were basically saying if you've exposed this on the internet. So which makes me think that, these home Soho devices are the big target, and it's awfully easy to end up with these things exposed. And regardless of what you're using, examine all your exposures on the internet. Management networks, everybody. Get that, VLAN 99. Come on. Anyway, KCodes Net USB is a kernel module which is used in all sorts of routers and has a serious flaw, apparently, which will allow remote code execution. Sentinel-1, who often reports on kernel exploits, reported that the problem is a pre-authentication buffer overflow, which would allow for the takeover of the device. Netgear, TP-Link, Tenda, EDI Max, D-Link, and Western Digital all use this particular kernel module on their devices. So according to Sentinel-1, they have not seen this being exploited as of yet. So it was an early report, but as we all know, the minute they report it, somebody's going to start exploiting it. The module, the reason it's a problem was the module was listing on port TCP 20,005. Okay, no big deal. But it was set to listen on 0.0.0.0. And as you well know, 0.0.0.0 means all interfaces. So it listens on everything from localhost all the way up through the WAN interface. So every interface is open port TCP 20,005. Which means somebody could connect to port 20,005 on the WAN side, which would be a bit of a problem. The article does have all the grim details about how this works and specific devices and all that kind of thing. So if you do have one of those devices, you may want to check out and see if there's a patch for your firmware. I already checked this morning on mine because I do have one, and it does not have port 20,005 exposed, so it's probably not at risk, but I did check it. As long as we're on bad news and Log4Shell is still an ongoing problem, where researchers reported 8 high-severity vulnerabilities in third-party web applications that result from URL parsing security bugs. So this is very similar to Log4Shell and the whole Log4j, fiasco. Flask, Belladonna's, Video.js, Nagios XI, and Clearance, which represent Python, C, JavaScript, PHP, and Ruby libraries, all had similar types of vulnerabilities there. All the apps in the list are third-party plugins or other library-type tools which are used in other code and as such set up similar Log4Shell-type vulnerability streams. So all of these are about URL parsing, what are called URL parsing confusing attacks. And basically what that means is if you can manipulate the URL somehow and you can pass a URL string into a server, and one of these libraries misinterprets it and does something unexpected, you have found a URL confusing attack. And so basically, much like Log4j, which was one of these types of attack, you can insert streams there, you can redirect things, you can cause it to download things. Log4Shell was about downloading whatever was there on some other server, and usually a dropper, but all that. So the article I attached has a nice review of all the different types of URL confusion attacks. So if you're interested in those things or you don't know a lot about them or you want to pass it along to somebody who's interested, but they do have a lot of stuff there. And you probably should be reading up on these attacks as well as all these vulnerabilities. So if you don't know a scheme mix-up from a /confusion attack, well, now you've got a place to start. Another example of this type of supply chain lib vulnerability was found in the open source Colors and Faker libraries, which are Colors in particular is widely used. Faker is used quite a bit as well. Apparently, what happened was the developer, so this is the actual person who built this library up, intentionally built an infinite loop into all the libraries and pushed or committed onto GitHub and NPM. And that basically deep fat fried people who were using these libs. Colors has 20 million downloads a week and 19,000 known projects linked to it on NPM. And Faker has 2.8 million weekly downloads and 2,500 projects linked to it on NPM. And that didn't include GitHub. So there's a lot of people using these libraries out there. But the initial result of this was that you would get all this weird ASCII on your screen that would just start streaming by. And it starts with the text liberty, 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 and then a whole bunch of garbage. And it just keeps going. It's an endless loop. The devs, a lot of people who were using this thought that some sort of compromise had happened. But according to Bleeping Computer, this code was intentionally committed on Sunday by Merrick Squires, who is the dev of Colors. And he added what he described as a new American flag module and pushed it on GitHub and NPM. The code has the infinite loop. It causes gibberish to print until you somehow kill the job. According to the article, the bug was pushed to punish, and this was a quote from him, it was pushed to punish mega corporations and commercial consumers that use open source projects and don't give back to the community. Okay. So Merrick had been making these kind of remarks all the way back in November 2020 and had said that he would no longer be supporting big corporations with his free work, that commercial entities should be considering either forking all these projects, or they should be compensating him with, quote, a yearly six-figure salary. I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you're using all sorts of code libraries like this in your commercial product, well, what do you do when the organization is brought down by somebody protesting or they intentionally disable you or whatever? I mean, I've been frothing about this a long time too, just like security through obscurity, but we all do it, right? I mean, you're writing something and right there in front of your very eyes, this glowing, beautiful thing off in the distance, and it's like on GitHub and somebody's already solved that problem and it's free. And the next thing you know, your code is like licking the underside of the bench in Grand Central Station. I mean, it's just like you've just brought it all home, and you've got everything. You don't just have COVID, you don't have Omicron, you don't have Upsilon, you don't have Delta, Alpha, Beta. You got the whole thing. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't have a good answer to this because, if you say, I'm just going to fork this off, well, you just created a whole new division of your unit that's going to be supporting this into the future because now you are supporting it. And so a lot of people don't want to fork off the projects. And they also probably don't want to pay Merrick six-figure salaries either to use it. So, I got to say, if you want to control your code, you are going to have to control your code. And you and only you can prevent, out-of-control code and code that licks the underside of the subway bench. Yep. I'm on that today for some reason. It's just been an image in my head all day. CISA says there have been no significant intrusions related to Log4j as of yet. But they did say, I mean, this article is a headline all over the place, and it says, CISA says there's been no, but they went on to say they really need you to urge prioritization of patching this problem in your organization because the situation may change abruptly at any time. CISA said they expect Log4j to be used in intrusions well into the future and that threat actors are going to take advantage of this vulnerability, especially against critical infrastructure. There are currently 3 separate vulnerabilities described around Log4j, which you've seen over and over again. So if you can patch. And if you can't, well, either mitigate this by blocking it or preventing people from getting to it, or find a workaround that will allow you to prevent this exploit from being a big deal for you, or you're going to get got. I mean, I'm just telling you, everybody knows about this now, from nation states down to Gwen. Yes, Gwen, you know where you are right this very moment. All right, I put this one in for fun because I just couldn't resist it. But I saw this story, and it has nothing to do with technology really. But it was just one of those things. It basically the headline was that can snakes, bats, rats, spiders, and radioactive koala bears climb up the sewer pipe into your toilet? And we've all known somebody who had this phobia, right? That they're afraid of toilets. It's going to be snakes, rats, who knows what. Well, the article says it's not likely, despite all the videos to the contrary. Now, can a snake get into your toilet from the other side, like from the room? Yeah. But can they crawl up a sewer pipe? Probably not. I mean, they, in the article had a bunch of stuff about that. The good news is that most of the critters that they described, except Chuds, all bets are off. But most of these things cannot survive the trip through some narrow, winding sewer pipe of water. I've definitely heard of a rat getting through it. But it was one of those, my friend's cousin's sister's father was living in that, that second floor flat over on the west side, and the landlord won't fix it, and rats keep coming up into the toilet. And then they got it, and they named it Lenny. It brought him coffee every morning for 20 years until they both died in a freak blimp accident, but they were the most popular, TikTok videos of Lenny, the trained sewer rat. But anyway, according to my friend Lou, there were these hoop snakes in Hawaii that could somehow get into the toilet. But I think he might have had a few extra drinks that night, and they might have been putting drops of formaldehyde in them or something. So I never saw one, but he swore that they were there. Anyway, it's still probably not a bad idea to check under the rim when using strange facilities and rainforest gas stations. But, I think generally it's mostly an urban legend, except for Chuds. Chuds can get you anytime, anywhere. So the next time you use a toilet in the dark, just remember Chuds can come up through the pipe. And if you don't know what Chuds are, you're welcome to Google that. But yeah. His most recent prank was base jumping into Times Square wearing only a diaper and a tiara that says bitch on New Year's Eve. Andy Cohen said, "Look, Anderson, it's my Uncle Phil. Everyone's favorite guest commentator and permanent commentator, it's Jason Wood."
Hey, Doug, good to be back with you again. I have missed our random introductions, I guess. Hey, everybody, it is great to be back with you in the new year. So this article actually started out from something I saw on the Daily Swig from Portswigger. Apparently, attribution on cyber attacks is actually kind of difficult, and sometimes different countries or groups come up with different attribution. I mean, it's almost like trying to guess what Doug is going to say next when he introduces me. It's just all over the place. Anyway, that's basically the situation according to a German think tank, which is named German Institute for International and Security Affairs, which its German version of that, basically the abbreviation is SWP, so that's how I'm going to refer to them from here on out. Anyway, SWP came out with a publication a few weeks ago, a paper that they had released discussing problems with attribution and basically how to respond back with some kind of sanction or diplomatic maneuvers to try and head off cyber attacks against members of the EU. And they just went through and started laying out some of the problems they're having around attribution and responding to attacks that they have happen against either countries or companies that are inside those countries, inside the EU. So I went and took a look at the blog post by the Daily Swig, where they've got some comments from folks in the threat intel industry, as well as scan through the 40 some odd page publication or paper by SWP. And this really just kind of caught my attention just because of what I do at work. Attribution is just kind of an interesting area of threat intelligence and what goes into doing threat or attribution of it. So I dug in and took a look. Basically, it looks like the paper is meant to, and SWP as a whole, but it's meant to inform and influence German politicians, Germany's government, on different positions that they'll take inside of the EU or in the international scene. And what appears to be that they're dealing with is that inside the EU, they've got this problem of, hey, we're getting attacked. We want to respond to discourage this, but we have a lot of problems with doing this here inside the EU because different countries have different technical capabilities, they have different levels of intel capabilities, and different ideas of what's important to them. So we end up with wildly different attribution coming from different member states within the EU itself. And as the EU kind of acts like it's almost a nation, but not really, it's kind of something in between, I guess. As a trade bloc with extra capabilities. This is basically an issue that they're trying to grapple with and figure out how to respond when a cyber attack occurs. It interrupts, let's say, trade or negatively impacts a member state. And So it was just really kind of interesting to read, particularly as you're kind of picking out their point of view in this. The position of the paper really is that the EU needs to tighten up on their procedures for analyzing attacks and coming back with attribution, and how are they going to respond to that publicly, again, either through diplomatic protests or sanctions or things like that. One of the issues they point out is inside the EU, it takes months or years to do attribution and have it be decided on. Honestly, it takes months and maybe a year or so years to come up with attribution publicly anyhow, but it still is, they're grappling with this tussle here between the different states. The Daily Swig quotes people from Trend Micro, Recorded Future, and Mandiant, their responses to the paper, and the opinions vary a little bit on really how useful attribution is and how accurate it may be. There's a quote that I want to go ahead and share from Bob McArdle from Trend Micro, who seemed to be pretty wary of attribution as a whole and its usefulness. And his comment was, attribution is difficult, time-consuming, prone to misleading conclusions due to lack of data, and most of all can have high impact if done correctly. It is relatively trivial for a skilled group to plant false flags, such as TTPs of another group, strings of text in a certain language, or use another group's preferred method or preferred tooling, with the specific goal of actually pushing the security industry to misdiagnose its source. In an era where a cyber attack can immediately lead to major political fallout, we believe that attribution is simply irresponsible. End quote. Now, there are certainly examples that we have of that, that are publicly known about. A couple of years ago, I remember reading some articles basically about, if I'm remembering this right, some Russian groups that had taken over Iranian infrastructure and was using that to conduct their own attacks. And it took a while for governments to kind of pick through that and realize that, hey, it looked like it was coming from Iran in the first place, but as they dug into it further, and I'm assuming compromised that infrastructure and looked at more of what's going on, led them back to Russia instead. And that was Russia's trying to throw Iran under the bus for what they were doing. And there are obviously other simpler methods of doing that, putting stuff like, hey, this was done on a Cyrillic keyboard, as a way of blaming the Russians, for example. To an extent, I can see what McArdle is getting at here. But, at the same time, it's groups who are performing intelligence analysis should already be taking this into account. I mean, there's certainly techniques and methods to try and root things like that, like analysis of competing hypotheses, where you throw out different ideas. Well, what if it is Russia trying to blame the Iranians here, and looking for evidence along those lines. And it certainly gets addressed in a number of papers and articles that have been published for a number of years. Regardless, it's understandable for why governments want to do attribution, why they need to take a different approach here, because cyber attacks are something that are a powerful weapon, or tool rather, for a country to use to accomplish some kind of goal, disrupt something inside of a target country, or gather information, or who knows what. They're pursuing some objective, and if you're a country, you need to respond to that, and you need to make sure you're responding to the right person or country that's potentially behind something. So attribution is just always going to be there. I mean, it's understandable why people would want it anyhow. That way they can try and put a price to the originating party on this. Certainly if I'm a business in the US or the EU, I can't use attribution for much more than maybe satisfying my curiosity. It's not like I can go and sanction a government or anything like that. That's, again, a responsibility of the governments. The paper, again, itself was saying, was really just trying to influence German politicians, is what it looked like, and use that to influence their interactions with other EU member states. In fact, it even went out at one point and made it, explicitly said the German government needed to get on board with an initiative by the French government, where they're trying to change the response to a cyber attack from unanimous vote to just a majority vote. And so they're trying to get Germany on board with that idea. But like I said, the article is pretty long itself, or the paper is pretty long. It's about 40 some pages. But it was interesting to skim through and see some of the back and forth in here and what their concerns are and what they're trying to accomplish and influence on. So if this is something you're interested in looking at, attack attribution, the impacts of it, geopolitical positions and whatnot, go ahead and check this out in the show notes. Like I said, it's a fair bit of a read. It's not a light read, but you can take a look and see what you think.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, that's a very interesting concept of I'm just going to type all this in on a Cyrillic keyboard and we'll see what that does. Fun. Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, little compilation options here and there.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's like there's all kinds of little things you could do like that, right? That would mislead people, especially if you're a nation state. I mean, come on. It's like you got a few resources there at hand. Interns, whatever. Or even a big hacking gang, right? You got interns, you got trainees, All right. And finally, they did have CES this year. Nobody sponsored me again, so I didn't get to go. But this article had some of the weirder things that were there. One was a foldable laptop, which I was like, what? I mean, aren't laptops already? But apparently this laptop's just like a screen that you can fold over, and so, which sounds like just a recipe for disaster. There was a creepy robot that you can use at trade shows instead of sending people. So it's like this super creepy robot that will give people nightmares for years. Like I have a picture at my house. It was of my great-grandparents. It was made in the 19th century. It's terrorized generations of people who have been afraid of that picture. So now you could get this probably for your kid and have it sit there and talk to them when they wake up at night. And it's like super creepy robot like, hello, Brendan, I see you're awake again. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, and your kid's not going to grow up and turn into a crazed serial killer. There was something called Amigami Ham, which sounds pretty good, actually. Like, can you get that with hot sauce? But apparently it was a robot that looks like a little dog, and you stick your creepy scabrous finger in its mouth, and it chews on you. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Okay, I don't know. I have no idea. Cat fitness trackers. I mean, because everybody wants their cat to be buff. They also had a dog model, so you could just put the fitness tracker on your cat, and you can see how many steps the cat's getting a day, how many times the cat peed on your bed, that kind of stuff. A giant inflatable moon house, so that just in case you happen to suddenly get that job you've been shooting for on Ceres or something, you'll be ready to go. Mr. Magoo glasses that supposedly provided augmented reality without making you look ridiculous. They looked really ridiculous. I mean, maybe they were as ridiculous as one of those big headsets, but they looked pretty ridiculous. But, all that kind of stuff. So if you did miss CES, you want to catch up, well, there you go. Welcome back in 2022. We have tons of shows and other content, and who knows, maybe there'll even be a con or two in person this year, and we can all get together and you can buy me drinks. Okay? Bye.